across Texas. The issue is...
I'm Rudy Koski in Austin.
I'm Greg Krugen in Houston.
And I'm Stephen Dow from Dallas on location in Kerr County, and this is Texas, The Issue Is.
The issue up for discussion is how will state lawmakers respond to this catastrophic flooding that has happened all across Texas during the July 4th weekend. Early warning, disaster planning were added to the upcoming special session. Governor Greg Abbott and I talked about some of the ideas being pitched as we did an aerial tour above the Guadalupe River. I put together several key points that he made in that discussion, beginning with the idea of installing warning sirens in high-risk flood zones.
It is one of literally dozens of ideas, and we're going to take a look at this session. You asked the important question. Is it practical? Is it effective? Here's the point. We can't, from the capital in Austin, Texas, dictate to these people what's going to be most effective for them. We need them to weigh in and give us what their best thoughts and ideas are, what they think works. I'll tell you one thing that doesn't work, what it is a guy who's been here for 20 years to this great region every summer. I know that cell phone service is spotty at best, non-existent most frequently. And so alerts that typically would come over a cell phone or things like that probably didn't make it. So there has to be, what everybody can agree upon is there has to be a better way. It's kind of like a tornado about 5 or 10 times wide, stretching on for, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50 miles. Two good solutions here. It may not work in Central Texas. So we got to be careful about pretending that if one size fits all answer may fit in every situation. Texas river basins are different. We have to look support at ensuring public safety in every region of the state. Similarly, up north of where Speaker Myrtle's is, remember the fires that took place up there last summer. And we got to make sure that those are going to be able to have similar warning systems. Whatever the case may be, I can tell you that what we do here is going to be the right fix elsewhere. Can't tell you the right fix elsewhere is going to be the right one here.
No way we see up there the water marshal up here. There, all of its homes.
It's something we're going to be involved in for weeks or months to get all that cleaned out.
Adding this special session, this got to be a special allocation for if you have the money in the bank to handle this.
So, for one, as one of the benefits of the president making the major disaster declaration so quickly, and immediately freed up a lot of funds to be able to address the needs that all these communities have right now. The way that disaster declaration works is the federal government is going to pay for 75% of all the costs associated with things like debris removal, etc. And what we will do during a special session, among other things, is evaluate the ways that the state can aid these communities through funding. But funding is just one of the things that the state will focus on in a special session when it comes to addressing the challenges that they're facing down here, as well as the actions that have to be taken to make sure that these communities remain safe and resilient for many years into the future.
All right, guys, the word for the issue for me is a big issue and a big word. It's accountability. Stephen, what's your word?
My word is response, and I know we'll dive into that after the break.
Greg, get us to the break and give me your word.
Rudy, the hurt here is deep and lasting, so my word is heartache.
All right, and with that, we'll be back to discuss the upcoming response to the floods. All right, welcome back to The Issue Is. The focus on the 4th of July flooding is about to shift with the start of the special session on the 21st. Under the Capitol Dome, the discussion will not only be about response, but also responsibility. Stephen, you're in Kerr County. You're down there at ground zero, near that, seeing all the devastation. What are people there saying that they want as far as a warning plan?
Right, and I think, this is a political show and we're going to talk about the politics of this issue, and accountability is important. Figuring out what went wrong or what happened and what can be fixed is important. Right now, people are still talking about the recovery portion of this, still trying to find the over 150 people who have not been located. But then you're going to start talking about why this happened and can it be prevented. In a neighboring city and county, they have emergency sirens near the river. And so that is definitely, I think lawmakers will probably pass that, Rudy and Greg, within a couple of days in the special session. But there is much more to dive into with this subject.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be a deep dive. The governor in the interview indicated any plan has to be flexible, but being proactive when you know the risk levels have increased, that, guys, is pretty universal, and that can't be ignored. Greg, on the coast, for example, state parks evacuated when big storms are still spinning up in the Gulf, and that usually happens, the evacuation, about the time when the state ramps up first responders. I think that's a good trigger point, don't you, for our new statewide disaster plan? Clear the camps, RV parks, and danger zones when the governor activates emergency response like he did 2 days before this flood. What are you hearing?
Look, Rudy, I spoke with Senator Ted Cruz this week, and here's my takeaway. You can bet the ranch some kind of siren system is coming on the Guadalupe. Rudy, I've been in the accountability business for 40 years, and let me tell you, I'm not sure any preventative measure would have lowered the number of lives lost given the speed and ferocity of this event. That said, politicizing this colossal loss as families grieve turns my generally cast iron stomach. Perspective, back in 1969, I went to Camp Stewart, not far from Camp Mystic. Since then, there have been presidents and governors from both parties in charge, none of whom insisted on the kind of warning system we're all talking about now as a necessity. So, we can talk about accountability, but it needs to be across the board.
Yeah, I still believe there was 2 days where the state was ramping up, and that we know that some camps did take advantage of that 2-day heads up and got kids out, moved kids out of harm's way. And I think that has got to be remembered. It can't just be relied on a siren system. Now, when I was in the flood zones in Kerr, Burnett, Williamson counties, I heard a lot of talk about accountability, which we're talking about now, like holding those responsible for executing a disaster plan accountable for not being more proactive. There's been a lot of dodging when the question comes up, and a lot of pushback against blaming local leaders in Kerr County for what they did and didn't do before the flood advisories went up. Stephen, have you heard anything to indicate state lawmakers are just going to punt the accountability issue to civil lawsuits that we know are coming?
I think things will evolve as the weeks and months come out, and I think we may learn a different timeline. We may learn more information as lawmakers are in Austin. I think right now, especially this week, and I know this is airing on Sunday, let 7 days, let 8 days go by. I think we'll start to hear more things, and the conversation will start to shift more, probably more political, in fact, when lawmakers get in Austin. I think right now some are just trying to be sensitive to the families.
All right, Greg, I'm going to let you weigh in on this too. Holding local officials accountable could certainly be a hot political potato for state lawmakers when they return to Austin for them to handle. Greg, Houston State Senator Paul Bettencourt, he was quick to say, let's do something, and he likes holding the big stick over locals.
He does, and frankly, it's a proven, very productive, necessary course of action here. But Rudy, let's talk apples and oranges. Harris County has 5 million people and a multi-billion-dollar budget. Kerr County has 50,000 residents, a number smaller than most Bayou City neighborhoods. I think trying to slam any degree of blame or malfeasance on small-town elected officials with lots of needs doing the best they can with the resources taxpayers give them is at best misguided and at worst despicable scapegoating.
All right, I think accountability is going to be a big word when the session comes up in a couple more days. All right, we'll wrap that up. Greg?
All right, we're going to end it there. When we come back, we're going to get a perspective from a Democratic lawmaker. Stay with us. Welcome back. State Representative Ron Reynolds sat down with Houston anchor Isaiah Carey to talk about the upcoming special session and the need to get people answers.
This will be our top priority as we go into the special session starting on July 21st. I'm thinking all 150 members are going to be committed in the House, and all 31 state senators are going to be committed in the Senate on holding public hearings and finding best practices, so we can't keep putting Band-Aids, having these natural disasters, and leaving people vulnerable to floods or other natural disasters. My hope and prayer is that we'll put all kind of politics aside and go where the facts and science leads us. There should be accountability. People want answers to what went wrong. And people also want confidence, knowing that if we have these events in the future, which likely we will, that we're prepared for it, that we'll be resilient, and that we'll have the proper monitoring, that we'll have the proper systems in place, sirens and everything else, so that people are alerted that they can evacuate timely. Those are the things that we're going to be looking for when we start the special session. So I'm prayerful that we will do everything we can, commit the resources, because one of the things that the Governor Abbott didn't say is that this could have been addressed in the past. He didn't say that, but we now know that there were requests from Kerr County commissioners on 3 separate occasions since 2016 for $1 million from the state to get prepared to have the kind of sirens that were needed. We now know that they didn't get those requests. They put up $50,000 to have engineers to do a report to see an assessment of what's needed to keep their citizens safe. That assessment said one of the things that we need is sirens, the kind of sirens that could alarm people, the residents, in the event of needed evacuations. They did the first request after that. Then they did another request after Hurricane Harvey. And then they did a third request. Each and every request was denied by the state. That to me, someone has to be accountable. There needs to be a transparency. People need to know, because the system failed that community. They didn't have the resources. They made a request through grants from the state that could have easily, $1 million from our state budget is nothing, Isaiah. So we need to know, why was that request denied when we know for a fact that this was one of the most high floodplain areas in the state and in the country? Why were they denied this request? I don't know, but those are the kind of answers we'll be seeking when we start those hearings starting July 21st. Here's the hardcore facts, and I'm not making this a partisan issue, but the Republicans have been in charge for the last 30 years. They owe the state answers. They were in charge. They can't put it on anybody else. They can't blame other people. They were in charge. And I'm not saying that as gloating. I'm saying that as reality. The reality is, these are tough questions. When people die, that's like a plane crash. They want to know what happened, what went wrong. After
Where's that black box?
After Uvalde, people want to know what went wrong. After Harvey, they want to know. People in this situation, they want to know answers. And Governor Abbott, you need to go, as the top elected official in the state, you have a responsibility to make sure that there is transparency, accountability.
Well, there you have it, fellows. Representative Reynolds first claims he doesn't want to make this colossal tragedy a partisan issue, and then proceeds to politicize it. Rudy, it gets down to this. Reynolds says Republicans were in charge, so they have to accept the blame for any deficit in life-preserving preparation. Is that fair or unfair?
Greg, he's right. The Texas GOP has been in control of the state legislature for more than a decade, and the state has been flush with surplus money to use for big ticket items like siren systems. But Reynolds forgot to mention there was also some local pushback to that idea, and the governor did actually talk about that. I had that in one of my reports when I was down there, and I spoke to the governor about that, and he brought that up. So it's not necessarily a clear-cut idea in regards to what happened with the sirens there in Kerr County. But again, a lot of blame game going on a little bit, and that doesn't help. There is a big budget expenditure cap to prevent the surplus from being depleted, so that's also in play. But, you know, what better use for the rainy day fund than address a disaster protection gap? It's also worth noting that the Fort Bend County Democrat, he's been a state representative since 2010, 15 years on the job. So he's very vocal on a lot of social agenda issues. It'll be interesting to see what ideas Representative Reynolds comes up with and brings to the table in a few weeks. So I agree, getting political, playing the partisan card doesn't help the legislative process, but accountability, 100% with the representative, it's got to be part of this new plan. Greg?
Yeah, Stephen, Reynolds talks about Republicans being in charge for 30 years, but neglects to mention Democrats have controlled the White House 12 of the last 16. What's your take on the finger pointing? Does anybody think a siren system in red rural Kerr County would have been a top priority in a hypothetical Democrat-run Texas?
Well, everything is political, right? Everything we do is political. And you have to play the balancing act, right? We are talking about lives lost. We are talking about a mass casualty event, mass impact that's going to be felt for years to come here in these communities. But at the same token, you do have to talk about not just scoring political points, but talk about how it could have been prevented or ways to help save some life. And I know Senator Ted Cruz and some others have talked about that in recent comments this week, talking about could a few more lives have been saved. Now, is there any type of thing that could have totally prevented anyone from losing their life? No. But I think there is a conversation to be had. And if the shoe was on the other foot, let's be honest, we would have heard the same rhetoric from some of these lawmakers about the other side. Is finger pointing good in a time like this? No, but that's what politics is, and that's what politics in America is.
All right, Rudy, do you think Reynolds' criticism foreshadows what we can expect in the upcoming special session from Democrats? Or do you think lawmakers will set aside the respective inclination to demagogue and focus on constructive countermeasures?
Well, we can hope and wish, but no, I think the partisan blame game is already well underway. Thursday, State Senator Roland Gutierrez and the former FEMA director with the Biden administration held a news call to blast the Trump administration's efforts to reform and streamline FEMA. The DNC also followed that up, pushing out a release claiming Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem withheld FEMA's urban search and rescue teams for more than 3 full days after the floods, and also claims cuts to the National Weather Service are putting lives at risk. The only problem with those claims is that we know the feds did send special response teams to Kerr County, Coast Guard making several high-risk rescues, and here in Central Texas, a unit from Fort Hood prevented a mass casualty situation during the height of the storm. You know, with midterm elections coming, you know, it's a sure bet the flooding will become political, Greg.
All right, Stephen, a focused special session on saving future lives, or the blame game in pursuit of a political advantage?
I honestly think we're not going to see that much drama when it comes to the resources being allocated to the Hill Country. You want to know why? Because that makes both sides look good in the end. And Governor Abbott snuck in some things on that agenda that is going to take up a lot of airspace. I think the funding, the sirens, whatever it's going to be, will be rubber stamped and approved, possibly even week 1. And then the real fight is going to be redistricting and THC.
All right, Stephen, take us to the next segment.
Yes. So we've got issues, and I'm pretty sure they'll be a little toned down, but we'll see you on the other side of this break. Well, this segment is called We've Got Issues, and most times, guys, I talk about sports and some lighthearted things, but I got to address the elephant in the room of what's been happening, what we've been covering all week, the tragedy in Kerr County and in Texas's Hill Country. I just want to give a shout out to all the first responders and local law enforcement that came from across the state. We've been having conversations of our own with all of these men and women who left their families to help the families here in Kerr County. And some of them are volunteer firefighters in other volunteer positions. So not really a peak paid position. And so I just want to give a shout out to the first responders here. Rudy.
Yeah, a huge salute to all those folks that have come in, and not only just across the state, but across the nation and Mexico. We've had teams from Mexico here. My extra issue is, and it's going to be an oddball bounce away from all this sadness and give us a little something to smile about. And my issue is professional tennis. It's in play, and it seems to be giving that pickleball craze a little bit of a backhand return action that it deserves, right? A few weeks ago, the French Open had a big increase in viewership. A lot of eyes on that match over the numbers from last year. And guess what? Coco Gauff, she won on the clay. Way to go, girl. Wimbledon now underway, offering its own game, set, and match drama on the grass, with a record-breaking number of top 10 players getting bounced out. Unfortunately, that included Coco. So pickleball may be a hot issue, but it looks like big-time tennis is still smashing it, baby. Greg, take it away.
My issue, in case we needed any more powerful, painful, poignant reminder than what has unfolded since July 4th, none of us are guaranteed anything in this life. So treasure the people you love and who love you. Invest the time to relish their affection, revel in their successes, and when necessary, suffer in their setbacks. Build a hefty survival kit of sustaining memories. Leave nothing that needs saying unsaid. Have no regrets. We'll leave it there. You can see the interview or any of our past interviews by going to our YouTube pages.
And please keep this conversation going on our YouTube and social media sites.
A big topic that was big before the tragedy in Kirk County was Colin Allred officially entering the Senate race and who may join with him. We'll have that when you join us next week on Texas The Issue Is. And don't forget to let us know what you think the issue is.